Hi, this is Paul Bedford, Business Growth Specialist, and today I'm with Brendan from 365 Response. And Brendan, you've got quite an interesting history, haven't you?
Well, yes, I've done some interesting things over time.
Yeah, we were talking on the phone. So, as you know, the idea of this business series is about small business success.
Yep.
It's about talking to people like yourself who've had success and looking at how we can help small business owners to boost, to get through those tough times.
Yep.
And also to see opportunities. And anything that you think would really help a small business would just be fantastic. So let's start with your story.
Okay.
I found it really interesting.
Okay, fine. So, a bit unusual, I suppose. I started out in broadcasting. I was quite fortuitous after I left university. I ended up on the BBC's national training scheme for broadcast journalism. Ended up in Plymouth, of all places.
Plymouth, that exotic location.
Well, yeah, I mean,
everyone wants to go to Plymouth.
When I did the application form, it was last on my list.
It was really.
But yeah, absolutely. I go, well,
I'll go to Plymouth and I'm desperate.
Yeah, well, sensibly, they had a set of.
Sorry, anybody from Plymouth. Yeah. We love Plymouth.
Actually, I really like Plymouth as well.
I do as well.
So it was it was a bit of a surprise to me, and I did that for a period of time. I ended up working for BBC Midlands Today in Birmingham, which is fantastic.
Another great city.
Another great city.
I'm from Birmingham.
Well, I'm a West Bromwich Albion fan, so
right.
Brilliant. So it was quite nice actually because
I'm not a West Brom fan.
I was working there as doing the sports, so I did get to see quite a lot of West Brom as well, which does make.
That's quite good if you're a fan.
Yeah, it was quite good. Yeah,
Did you feel like they going? Oh, that was rubbish, West Brom.
Well, actually, it was really interesting. So the season following that, I went to run a national radio station, and I ended up doing some match reporting for them. I was in charge, so I got to choose the matches. And West Brom were playing Coventry. This was right towards the end of the season. And Wolverhampton had been in the automatic promotion places for the entire season.
Right.
And in that game, we took them over. So we caught them up by about, I can't remember the exact point, about 15 points behind them at one point. And we caught them up, overtook them, and ended up getting promoted to the Premiership. So it's pretty memorable. But I was doing the report for Coventry, and obviously...
Oh, you were doing it for Coventry?
No, I was doing it for the radio station.
Oh, yeah.
So you've got to try and be independent, haven't you? Also,
you've got to be kind of a little bit neutral.
Yeah, I lost it completely.
You did.
I was absolutely... I couldn't hide my delight. Well, I could hide it because I was on radio. But, my sense of elation was sort of something else. Because they'd played, I think, at the lunchtime, if I'm right, and lost. So we knew if we'd won, we'd go above them. Yeah, we'd go above them.
Awesome.
And it was pretty special, actually. So, that was great. But broadcasting generally, I think I did it for 5.5 years or so, and then felt that I'd probably done all I wanted to do in that space. I think there are a number of factors, personal life, and I couldn't see a path, a long-term path for me career-wise. So bizarrely, I ended up joining the NHS, which was great.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was a strange jump, but really the story behind that, if I'm honest, is that the radio station I was with was part of a larger .com business, and it was mainly focused around betting. So this is a sort of pre-betting.
I can see where the NHS comes in.
Yeah, there's a natural fit, and they got bought out basically. It was a hostile purchase. And they didn't want the radio station, or at least not the radio station as we were running it. So they closed it down. They came in, they closed it down literally the day they purchased the business. So quite shocked, it was only 28.
Yeah.
They came in and said, no, we don't want this.
So I bet there's a lesson you learn from that.
Well, there are a number of things. Firstly, and it probably is something that you see a lot now is how much money impacts people's business sense. Yeah. So I don't actually think there was a brilliant business plan behind that decision.
No.
I think what happened there was that the business owners sold that business at the right, actually floated it. I can't remember, but I think on AIM, and obviously made a significant amount of money. This was 2000, 2001, so right at the top. So they did really
they got
well.
the wave.
But the problem was that created a huge amount of cash within the business.
Yes.
Now, obviously, cash you would think is a big plus.
You would have thought so.
But when you've got investors, when you're invested business, there's a constant pressure on you to purchase and to grow.
Yes.
And you could see the decision making wasn't as systematic as you'd want it to be.
Right.
They weren't spending money like it was your own money. They were spending their money because they had to spend the money. And there's a very risky strategy there. In fact, I've seen that in other bigger businesses as well, where poor decision making is driven by speed of decision and the lack of detail in the decision. So for me, the takeaway from that was when I got into that situation, I wanted to try and be a bit more purposeful about the decision-making processes that you go through.
So maybe follow a proper process.
Yeah, follow up. If you can, as much as
standard
possible,
way of doing it.
not to the point of being inflexible,
No.
but to the point where you really are thinking about what is it I'm trying to achieve,
Yeah.
and if I'm spending money, what am I spending that money on, and what is the return going to be on that money?
It's
Now,
really
I'll be
important,
honest and
isn't
say that I've made mistakes since then. It's not.
Haven't we all?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't get to 28 and stop making mistakes. But I know.
That's impressive.
But I look at some of those mistakes, and you realise that the external factors can drive decision making.
Yeah.
And those external factors are not always the right things.
And those external factors can skew your thinking a little bit.
Yeah,
don't they?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting piece is, but in that organisation, and then later in my career when I was running a healthcare business, I think there's some really interesting learning to take away from that. So firstly, I had a great mentor in that business, and that was really helpful to me. He was an American guy.
I would say this obviously, but a great mentor's really important.
No, really, really important.
No, it really is.
He came across. He was looking after the European businesses as a whole.
Yeah.
But he was really good actually. He was good at carrot and stick, and just a great coach actually.
Yeah.
He was very committed to the business in a way that was very impressive. But he was also incredibly committed to the people in the business. And what I liked about him, and something I've taken with him ever since, is that he really spent time with everybody. Yeah. And I think it's a bit of a business cliche, but the way that he interacted with people, both the very most junior members of staff to the most senior members of staff, was mighty impressive actually. And even to this day, I still can hear his words of advice in my ear when I'm sitting. Cool. I remember he always said, never over negotiate. Never show your hand right off the bat. Let the other side negotiate with you rather than the other way around. And I always hold that now. Whenever I'm sitting in a negotiation, I try to rein back that instinct to try and instigate that negotiation, because you give away your position.
I found silence
is
a fabulous weapon when you're
it
negotiating.
Is. No, it absolutely is.
And I'm terrible at being silent.
Also, the other thing is, and this is particularly, I think, the case for small businesses, is particularly if you've got an interesting piece of work that you want to win, a contract that's attractive to you, where you think the price might be, isn't necessarily reflected with the organisation that you're talking to, particularly if you're talking to much bigger organisations. Sometimes you can, in your enthusiasm to get a contract, underprice against the market price.
Absolutely.
And I think, if you allow the other side to come to you with terms, sometimes that backfires. It's not an absolute, 100%. But if you allow the other side to come to you with terms, that usually is an incredibly useful way of understanding where you need to be to get work, without coming out of that meeting with a sense of, actually, I should have priced myself.
Yeah, that's right.
So
it's a great thing to win the work, but it's a horrible thing to think I could have actually doubled the price and still won the work.
Well, actually, probably don't necessarily agree with that. I'll tell you what I think is, it's really important, and I think sometimes this gets lost. It's really important to understand if you're going to do work and it's going to be profitable.
Profitability.
Yeah. So I think and again, lessons learned. The example I gave you of the radio station, I don't think enough thought was given about whether the work was going to be profitable or how it was going to become profitable. And when I worked in patient transport for the American company, I don't think we spent enough time really nailing down how to turn that into a profitable endeavour. Yeah,
because that's really interesting to say that, because one of the things obviously that you do and that I do with business owners is make sure we know their break-even point.
Yeah.
A lot of business owners go, turnover so and so.
Yeah.
But if your turnover's 2 million or 5 million, but you're actually losing,
you're
making a loss.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You've made a machine that will convert £1 into 90 pence, for example, which is a stupid machine.
It is. It is.
I mean?
And I think one of the really interesting things that I see a lot with the organisations, some I've worked with, some I've done, I've been involved with, is that there is a drive at the moment, I think, particularly in the tech sector, which is where we work, to push revenue at all costs. Yeah. And I always think it's really interesting when you look at an Uber and you realise how much money they're losing and how much money actually they're having to use to subsidise that business.
It's scary.
It's scary, but it's also something about, that obviously has an impact on the market, because they're able to use those funds to manipulate pricing effectively. Not in a, obviously not in a bad way necessarily, but they're funding, they're funding each of those journeys. If you look at the numbers that they're losing per quarter, for a small business, that just isn't an option.
No.
So you're in a very different place psychologically in terms of how you think about each and every piece of work that comes along. And execution is really, really, really important.
That's really interesting as well. You look at Amazon when they first started, they made a loss for loads of years.
Well, I think they've only really started.
They only started making money now.
Yeah, no, I think probably the last 2 or 3 quarters, it's really started to churn out quite a lot of cash.
But as you say, as a small business, looking at big businesses and trying to replicate what they do, it doesn't work most of the time.
And I struggle a bit with the cult of personality as well. So, I think we've probably all fallen into the habit of looking at Steve Jobs and going, I wish I was like Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Well, there are lots of things that made Steve Jobs, and it wasn't just Steve Jobs' personality.
No.
It was condition, it was time.
Yeah.
There's definitely an element of luck. Yes. But actually, I don't really want to be Steve Jobs. That's not what I aspire to be. I think there are lots of things that come with those kind of opportunities that are as unattractive as they are attractive. And I think there's a pressure. There's at the moment there's a pressure, particularly as I say in the tech sector, to invest fast, to grow quickly, or seem to be growing quickly. Yeah. And that comes at the detriment of actually what's wrong with building a really good business
that's got doing it properly.
Yeah, doing it properly. I mean, growing at a nice speed, but making good money. Yeah. And seeing that as something that's an investment, like the old days a bit, I think, that you put your effort into growing that business in the proper way. I've worked with a number of businesses where the owners have been in for 10 or 15 years, and in that 10 and 15 years, they've had to pivot continuously to get that competitive advantage, to keep building that business. And at times they've had to make tough decisions about getting rid of work that they don't want to do anymore, that's not suitable for their business as they move forward.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Have you had experiences of that yourself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we mentioned when we chatted about pivoting.
Yes.
I mean, that's a really cool point. So can you talk about a time when stuff was coming in and you just had to...
So I think this business, 365 Response, that I have now is a really interesting example of pivoting. So when we started the business, we had a concept of what we wanted to do. Yeah. We knew we wanted it to be digital, but digital is quite difficult to turn.
Sorry. Just a little overview of 365 Response, what they do first.
So we build platform services primarily in health and council areas, and primarily in transport, facilities management, that kind of thing. So really, what we do is we give our customers the ability to see where their resources are and manage them most effectively using a digital tool, basically.
Cool. And is that a software as a service?
It is. It's a software as a service, cloud-based provision. But to get there wasn't immediate. I didn't have a team of developers knocking it out straight away. We didn't have revenue straight away. Yeah. So we started our business really doing lots of consultancy type work. And that was fine, we enjoyed it, and we've done some really nice jobs over that period of time. But 18 months ago, we more or less said, we don't want to, that's getting in the way. We actually did one piece of work which took up a huge amount of the company's time and effort for a relatively modest return. Yeah. And because we believe very strongly that when you take a piece of work, you have to give it your best endeavours.
And finish it.
Well, not just finish it, but finish it,
but
but try to make it as good as you possibly can. Yeah. It absorbed a lot of time. And we sat down as directors, and we had other pieces of work that were ongoing, and said to ourselves, we have to let those pieces of work go now. They're actually bringing in money to the business, but we feel that in the long term, that's detrimental to the business's long-term strategic direction of travel.
That must have been a hard decision to make.
It's hard when you're taking money off the top and bottom
line.
We're
just going to stop making this money here. And
that's
concentrate on something that's probably not making as much money.
Yep.
Knowing that if you stop that, you'll have the people and resources to be able to carry on with that.
That's right.
Yeah. If it works out, you'll be making more money long term.
I think that's exactly how we saw it, though. I think we felt that, from our perspective, we never set the business up to be a long-term consultancy business. It was always a digital business. So you have to make those tough decisions. We knew there was an element of risk, and it is very uncomfortable ringing a long-term client.
Absolutely, yes.
And saying,
I have to let you go.
We don't want to do it anymore. And there's always that sense on the other end of, What?
I don't believe you.
Yeah, no, exactly.
We'll up your rate.
Yeah, exactly. And really, we just felt the business couldn't grow and develop in the way that we wanted it to. And it was a nuisance really for our staff when we're asking them to take on small pieces of related or unrelated work because it was revenue. Yeah. That's what it was. You know, again, we took all the jobs we've done very seriously, but we had to make that pivot happen.
Just to ask you one question. Was everybody with you on that decision, or did you have to win people over and try to influence people?
I think we're lucky. We've got a good team here, and you know, we've got a strong leadership ethos. I think we took the decision, and that was our decision. Yeah. One of the things about having your own business is I think you have to be brave enough to own those decisions, get on with it, and you know, I'm not necessarily a proponent of the, you know, you give everybody a choice. Opinion. Yeah, well, no, because I think you know
it's a benign dictatorship, isn't it?
I'm not sure I'd go that far. Maybe they would.
That's wrong. I'm joking.
No, but I think, but you're right, probably to a degree. I think it's, you know, between the three of us that own this business, you know, we have to make those decisions. It's our money that's on the line. Yep, it's our investment, and you have to make those decisions. And it's panning out just fine.
Good.
Which is, you know, that's good. No, it's good. And we haven't for a single second thought we need to turn back on that.
No.
But it was a pivot, and even the products as we look at them now, we're still pivoting. We're still making changes to what we thought was the original concept of the business, and some of that has come about fortuitously, and some of it's come about because we've seen opportunity as it's come along. Yeah. And I think that's something that sometimes I see with businesses, that people get very stuck on a particular idea.
It's a really good point, that. Have you ever read the book Who Moved My Cheese?
I haven't read it. I know of the book, but I haven't read it.
Well, there's a really rubbish animated one on YouTube.
Right. Okay.
But it's exactly what you're talking about. People, this is the way our business is. This is what we do. Market changes, things change.
Yeah.
The money falls out of that bit of market that they're in, but they don't change.
Yeah, and you see it a lot. I mean, there's lots of examples. I've just finished reading a book about Philip Green and BHS.
Okay.
And that's a classic.
I bet that's interesting.
It's really fascinating for all kinds of different reasons. I mean, you know, you read it with a sense of this can't possibly be happening.
No.
As the story develops. It's a brilliant book. I'd recommend anyone to read it. It's just interesting generally in business. It's a good book.
Yeah.
And it's written by a really, really good business journalist. But it's really interesting. But what you see there is that business is a classic business where there wasn't a pivot. There was just a blind belief that if you kept pushing on,
we will survive.
I think there are a number of other factors in there as well. But you can see, you can see it across the high street. You can see it with Toys R Us. You can see it with Maplin. You know, they haven't made a change to recognise the fact that you've got the Amazons of this world, and actually we're all, for those kind of commodity-based products, toys. I mean, you know, you're less and less going to go to a store because you want that choice.
You do.
And it's obviously different when you get into the business-to-business space. But there's a constant battle against the change that are taking against you, and you've got to be. I think sometimes people really love the idea they've come up with, and yet, you know, that idea may not be perfect.
Yeah, so I've started quite a few businesses over the years, and I thought the business was a brilliant idea. Yeah. But I didn't do my market research. I didn't find out if people wanted it.
And sometimes it's a brilliant idea, but it's not a business.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think sometimes that's really hard for people, you know. I tend not to work with startups because I think I like to get to the point with the company where they've gone a little bit beyond that.
Yeah.
They've gone through that original pain of working out whether there's actually a market. Yeah. And whether they've actually got the capability to take a product to that market and sell it.
Mm-hmm. Smashing stuff, great. So that's really good. Another thing we talked about on the phone was I thought your attitude on expenditure in the business was refreshing.
Yes.
A lot of people love glossy, gorgeous offices that cost a fortune, and you know what? In some instances, you do need to have that image in that particular place, but a lot of small businesses don't need the most expensive office
No,
in the city
I
that
think
they're
that's
in.
absolutely. So it's quite interesting actually. I'm a huge fan of the American program Shark Tank. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I haven't.
Oh no, you must watch it. It's fantastic.
I will.
It's on. I think it's on Netflix. Anyway, I'm completely.
Oh, if it's on Netflix,
it's completely addicted to it. Anyway, so Shark Tank is basically the American version of Dragon's Den,
Yes,
but it's loads better. It's just loads.
I
better.
bet they're ruthless.
Well, it's not just that they're ruthless. The investments are bigger, and some of these businesses they've invested in scaled to huge sizes. I mean,
Cool.
massive.
That's great.
Anyway, the reason I mentioned it was that I was watching it probably yesterday or the day before, and they had a business that came on that was basically a daybed for offices.
Oh,
A daybed.
right.
Well, no, this is where I don't think it is so good. But one of the sharks.
I'd be on that.
Well, yeah,
daybed.
but exactly. But one of the sharks sort of said, "Well, actually, I don't want that in my business because I want my people to come to work and work. I'm not really that, but I don't want them to be." Thinking it's okay to go and have a half an hour nap. No, and I'm, going back to cost and managing cost and thinking about the culture of a business. I get it. Listen, if I'm working in Shoreditch or if I'm working in those new Google offices in King's Cross, of course I'm going to get all that stuff that comes with it, and that's fine, I think, to a degree. But I think it's gone a little bit too far in terms of. You look at sometimes of these offices and you just raise your eyebrows a little bit. I was in an office in London of a business that remained unnamed, and in the reception they had a swing.
Okay.
A swing. I just thought, yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes, I think there's a bit of a cult around that. Those technology business, Google started it obviously, and Apple and so on. But actually, for me, I'm a Yorkshireman, so I think you've got to be really careful. I think culture's about looking after your staff.
Yeah.
But it's not about have I got palm trees and a free bar. It's about have I got have we got the right conditions for them to work in? Is it a nice environment? Do we look after people when they need to have time off?
Yeah.
Do we make sure that if people are not well, that we look after them and get them back to work properly? I think these are the really important principles on which businesses are built.
Yeah.
And I think some of the pressures that come on to owners to do some of the more, I think some of it's silly. I'll be honest, I think some of it's silly. No, I get it.
I think I agree with you.
And there's a trick here as well, of course. But Google giving you a free restaurant, giving you a gym, that's not about adding value to the worker's experience. It's about getting you to work for longer. Yeah. It's about increasing productivity.
Right. That's a good point.
Let's not fool ourselves into thinking this is some kind of free gift.
No.
If you're working on the Google campus in California, there's an expectation that you're going to be working very, very long hours.
Yeah.
And okay, you could argue that by putting those things in place, that's helping you. But actually, for me, I don't mind, and actually, encourage the team not to be working ridiculously long hours. They should have. There's a balance. There's a really important work. Balance between working in your social life, and that should be balanced. I think in some of the, and I think you see it in London a lot. I've been into some businesses where they've received good volumes of investment, if I was the investor, I'd be quite cross about watching money going on. Football tables and
plants,
a lot of plants.
Nothing wrong with plants.
Nothing wrong with plants. Well,
they do take a lot of looking after in an office.
You won't find many plants in our office.
No,
I'm afraid. There are some, I think, but not many. But I think for me, I'd want to see that money working effectively
properly. Yeah.
But not it's about that balance. Look after your people. Try and make the environment they work with as nice as possible. But recognise that I think there's a sensible limit, particularly for a small, medium-sized enterprise where you don't have to put in free gyms and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's like for Google, they're making so much money, why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
But again,
I've actually seen companies where they've had this incredibly expensive office, and they're actually starting to make a loss because of the office.
No,
costs.
I'm not surprised.
And we were talking before we started the video on the whole one of the simplest things in business is to reduce your outgoings and to increase your incomings.
Yes.
And then what's left in between is going to be your profit.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many businesses, they let these outgoings creep up and up and up and up. And before you know it, your break-even point is really quite high.
Yes.
And therefore, at the beginning, it's a lot of stress to try and get past that and actually get into the profit zone.
I think, one of the things when I'm coaching and working with entrepreneurs I talk about is that when you get investment, sometimes you feel that gives you a freedom, which is important because it allows you to concentrate. You've got to get the execution right, and when you're burning cash, you're burning cash.
Yes.
It's going and it's gone.
Yeah.
You know, so that, you know, what feels comfortable in month 1 starts to feel slightly more uncomfortable in month 6.
Yes.
And by the time you're in month 12 and starting to think about going for your next round of investment, you suddenly realise that you're burning cash at quite a healthy rate, and actually you're nowhere near where you said you were going to be from a revenue perspective.
Yeah, it doesn't look good, does it?
It doesn't look good, but also you get, I think, you know, I know of examples where I've seen talented entrepreneurs lose significant amounts of equity because they've got into this mind frame that you're consistently going on your rounds from, you know, your seed round through your A, through your B, into your C, into D. You know, you've suddenly created this huge amount of money, which is great. And of course, if it's successful, that leads you into these, you know, very generous returns.
Yeah.
But alongside that, you know, you see that equity value being diluted out every time, and suddenly, you know, you can find. I know of entrepreneurs that have started businesses that now have less than 10% equity,
and these must be quite heartbreaking, I would have thought.
I think it's heartbreaking if that business is not then at that point not turning over hundreds of millions of pounds. I mean, genuinely would be heartbreaking for me. I can see, you know, if you've been on a 5-year journey which sees your dilution consistently happening over a period of time, and really you haven't yet got to the point where there's a liquidity event that gives you money back. Yeah, that's really, really hard, I think. Yes. But you know, at the same time, as I said, I think sometimes we get distracted by some of the other things that we see in business now, the stuff we're talking about with Google and so on and so forth. I think the really important thing is about execution. I think it's sales, you know, and I think people really, sometimes you talk to people and you know they don't really understand the sales process and how they're going to get that sales working. And that for me, you know, that's really, really important. Nobody's perfect at sales. It's a hard game. It's a tough game. It's a tough game. And of course you have to have the right personality to go out and do that kind of stuff. And ideally you need to enjoy it, you know. Enjoying it is a good idea. It is a good idea, but you need to know that quite quickly if you're going to, you know, you don't necessarily have to be, as an entrepreneur, that person, but you need to recognize quickly that you're not that person and bring somebody else in to help you do it. And I see that sometimes where you meet entrepreneurs and you can sense that they don't really have a natural inclination towards sales, and they're forcing themselves to do that. And actually, you know, of course you can do training and you can get yourself better, but you know, I think sometimes it's, you know, in understanding and bringing in the right support to make sales happen, because obviously your business is completely dependent upon your sales. And the interesting thing is, I like yourself, I've talked to lots of startups and they've got these great ideas. I said, okay, so what's your documented marketing plan? Yeah. How are you going to sell it? Don't know. I was saying, look, that's where you need to start. You can't sell a thing. Likewise with sales, you know, I think sometimes I talk to people and they're talking about how they're going to get their sales done. Everyone's great at writing business plans, you know. Yes. You know, they're really. I mean, I think, you know, universities churn out people now who know how to turn out a really special business plan. But for me, I get under those business plans pretty quickly and say, how are you going to execute, you know, this hockey stick of sales? Yeah. What's going to happen? What's the transition in the business to turn from no sales to turning over, you know, 15 million in 3 years? What's the magic ingredient that's going to get you from there to there? And usually the answer is about the quality of the product, and that, you know, to a degree that might help you. Yeah. But you've got to be able to execute that sales plan really effectively. I was working with a software company, and they had a really great piece of software this was quite a while ago, and they had a piece of software that would go through your website, and then would tell you all the things you could do to optimize it for Google. Yeah. Now that was actually quite revolutionary at the time. Yeah. It was brand new, really good, full of bugs. A lot of software has a lot of bugs. Yeah. Just that there really is. It's hard to get rid of them, isn't it? Yeah. You know, if you're developing your software on a continual basis, you're gonna have bugs. Of course you are. And I always remind people that, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's an Apple product or a Microsoft product or a Google product. They always have bugs too. They do. And they've got development staffs of thousands. Yeah. You know, it is inherent to developing software that you're going to have bugs. It's one of those things, you know. And the real challenge for any business is to be able to iron out those bugs as quickly as possible. But the thing is, so they had a meeting with the developers and things like that, and they said, look guys, we've got a bunch of money here. We can either invest it into fixing all the bugs and making the product look more shiny and polished, or we can employ some really top-notch salespeople and sell more of it, so that then we can later on afford to Yeah.
put all the investment into the product and make it look shiny.
Yeah.
All the developers went, right, invest into the product right now. And the manager went, sorry, we're going to hire the salespeople. And my friend who worked for them was outraged at the fact that they weren't going to fix all these problems. But they did eventually, because they sold more, they made more profits,
and were able to invest
and
back
they had
into
more
the product.
customers, and they did invest back. But then it wasn't a risk, because they had the revenue coming in. Whereas had they not hired those salespeople, it might well have risked the length.
So there's another fascinating business book that I read about HubSpot, which is a CRM.
HubSpot's an amazing company.
Oh, well, it's really interesting. So it was a bit of an expose from a journalist that went to work there, and I think it's fair to say it's less than complimentary about the business.
Oh, is it?
It's a fascinating read, but that's exactly that. So you know, if the author is to be believed, there was a heavy dollop of skepticism about the quality of the product at that particular point.
Right.
But actually, the whole business was a sales business.
Yes.
Sales and marketing business, basically. So all the money was invested in land grab in that space. You know, you've got a Goliath in Salesforce.
Yes.
And they needed to get into that space, and it was SaaS, and it was lightweight, and it was for small businesses. So they just invested massively in sales.
Yeah.
Now, you know, obviously HubSpot's gone from strength to strength since then. So they got it right, and the journalist who, said was pretty critical. It's a pretty damning book actually on that kind of culture.
Yeah.
You know, and it's quite an interesting read as well. You know, definitely worth reading. But it comes back to the point you're making is that, you know, I think there's this real understanding for anyone that you've got to get the sales stuff right, because you know, brilliant ideas don't go anywhere unless somebody's going out and actually making the effort to sell it. And actually, you need to understand how you're going to sell it. How does that product get to market? What is it that you need to do? You know, we work across a number of businesses, and those businesses, some of them will require bid work. Some of them require long-term strategic relationship type sales, and some of it is simply telesales. Yeah. But they're alone across those businesses. We've got 3 or 4 different types.
Quite diverse.
Of sales strategies that need to be pursued, and you need to know which one is right for your business. Yeah. Because you know those businesses that focus on bidding, you know, using a telesales force isn't going to work.
No.
So you've got to understand that, you know, that difference, and I think that's something that people probably don't put enough effort in. You know, probably 3 things that probably kill small businesses early on is obviously the idea is just not very good. I think it's rubbish. I think nervousness and a lack of preparedness on sales, and then managing your finances and your cash.
Yes.
You know,
cash flow is king, isn't it?
People get, you know, I think people think it's a bit flippant to say it, but you know, cash is king in business.
It is.
And you know, if you've got one role in the business that's most important, it's that one that's collecting your cash. And I think we've all had bad debt in the past.
Yes.
And there's nothing more frustrating about it. And you know, some of that bad debt is, you know, you sort of shrug your shoulders and say it wasn't intentional, and some of it you wonder to yourself whether it was intentional.
About it.
Well, and also whether the other side never really intended to pay you. And
intention by them, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that occasionally you see that.
Does happen.
And I think, you know, early on in your career when you're starting, particularly starting the first business, is that you can be persuaded by people to wait for payment. But my advice would be, no. You know, you get paid. You know, make it your priority. Get the money in the bank.
Get a debtor system in place. So
absolutely.
That you're chasing those debts.
No, absolutely. You know, and set yourself really hard and fast rules as much as possible about how long you're prepared to wait.
Yes.
You know, is it 30 days? Is it 45 days? You know, would you go to 60? And under what circumstances you'd allow 60? You know, if it's a great debtor, so if it's a government payee, you know, 60 days is not acceptable, really. Yeah. But you'll probably let that slip to 60 days. If it's a small business that you've done work with, and you've said it's quite explicitly 30 days, and you're at 32 and 33 days, probably
there needs to be a mechanism.
Yeah, there needs to be a mechanism, some kind of understanding of how you're going to collect that cash, because there is that risk that you won't get paid for that.
I've
contracting is a thing that plays a really important role. Get your contracts in place, get them signed. You know, I think it's often the case that you're tempted to pursue work without signed contracts because you think, I've got to work, of course they're going to pay me. Get your contracts signed.
Got to watch that.
Absolutely.
Got to watch that. So I lost about 10k to a company they employed me to do stuff, and I did the stuff.
Yeah.
they knew they couldn't pay me.
Right. Yeah.
And I wasn't on the ball with putting my invoicing in.
And that happens. Yeah. I mean, particularly in consulting, where you feel like there's a relationship there and a trust.
Yeah.
You know, but I think you just have to in your own mind set yourself you know, is it 45 days? Is it 30 days?
Yeah.
When do you start saying to yourself, this person is not going to pay me?
Yeah.
And when do you stop doing work with them?
Yeah.
You know, we've all made mistakes. We're not.
It's
you know,
an
absolutely.
interesting
You know,
conundrum,
we've had our fair share of bad debt, and I'm sure we'll have more bad debt in the future.
Yeah.
But we try very, very hard to minimise the impact of that. And as your business matures, usually, you know, your reliance on individual customers reduces because you've got a broader spread.
Yeah. If one goes down, it's
exactly. And again,
disastrous.
it comes back to the point that we were talking about earlier on. If your business is healthy and it's profitable, then a bad debt is a nuisance and upsetting, but it's not terminal.
No, that's
but if
right.
your business is really hanging by a thread
Mm-hmm.
and you're not making any money,
Yeah.
then a bad debt can be the final.
It can be
piece. Because you just simply
nail
run
in
out.
the coffin.
Well, you don't have the money to run the business, do you?
No, that's
So
right.
so I think there's, you know, it's a really it's probably something that's the least exciting part of the
Yeah,
thing that you
it's not
do.
exciting, is it?
No, but it's
No.
really, really important. It's super,
it's
super important.
vital, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is really important, and I think people underestimate how much time needs to be put aside to collect that cash.
One of the things that I've been implementing in my business is just automating things. You know, through zero accounting, for
Yes.
example,
Yeah.
and go cardless for zero.
Yeah.
So that Zero will produce an invoice, send it to my customer. They set up a direct debit. It comes out.
Yeah.
And it's seamless.
Yeah.
And it happens every month. And I try and spread my payments monthly.
Yeah.
So that, you know, it's
You
not a
minimise
big
risk.
bill
Yeah, yeah.
in the end, and it's, you know, it's taken out, and it helps.
It
Really
does.
helps. You can't do that with some businesses, obviously, but if you can try and move a business to that model, really will makes a massive difference to the cash flow.
It does. It really does. I think
Yeah.
I think you're right. You know, you've got to try and take work in bite-sized chunks to minimise risk.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing worse than doing a huge piece of work, getting to the end of it, they don't want to pay you.
Yes.
It's done.
It's
You know,
right.
it's done.
You've lost all the money you paid the people to do the work.
Exactly.
And now they're not paying you either.
Exactly.
That's a double whammy.
It is a double whammy,
Yeah.
and I think, you know, you've got to be really careful with that stuff. And,
Yeah.
and I do see it. I mean, I think if you're relatively new in business, you know, you will trust people more than probably somebody like me who's been around a bit.
A little bit cynical. I'm a little bit cynical.
No,
so
I think that cynicism is
it's
probably,
born of actually.
and it's not a bad thing.
No,
you know, it's not a
that's
bad
right,
thing.
yeah.
You know, you need to have a little bit of a hard edge because you know that. Again, I'll come back to a point I made earlier. You know, the businesses that we have are our businesses.
Yeah.
We fund them.
Yeah.
It's our money.
Mhm.
You know, and you know, I'm not willing to give that away easily. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not here to be charitable. You know, we always work well beyond probably whatever we say we're going to do to deliver really good products. But
Yeah.
you know, I want people to pay me fairly for the work
Yeah.
that we've done, and at a competitive rate.
It's a business, isn't it?
It's a
just
business.
the definition of business.
It is a
isn't
business,
Yeah.
and as you know, it's important for us because, you know, we want to be continuously profitable,
Yeah.
and we want to use that money to invest back into the business and invest in the people that work in the business. You're only able to do that if you're doing those things well. You know,
Yeah,
if you're running a very late payment book, if you're at 90, 100 days, that's having an impact across your business. That's
Huge.
slowing you down
Yeah.
massively. It's like, you know, it really is massively slowing you down because you're simply not turning that cash around quickly enough.
Yeah.
And that's bad.
The more you can reduce that cash gap between invoice
I'd
and
love to be
payment,
running at 30.
better.
I mean, that would be great,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
it
But
would
I
be,
think-
wouldn't it?
It would. But I think, you know, anything between, you know, 35 and 45 days payment terms
Yeah.
on the whole is pretty good actually.
Yeah.
And you can be pretty pleased with yourself if you're in those areas. Once you're above 45, once you start to hit 50, 55,
That gets more difficult.
and again, as you said, it depends how you get paid.
Yes.
You know, and obviously with us being a SaaS business, we get paid monthly, and that's very helpful.
Great business model.
It is.
isn't
It really is
Yeah.
a nice way.
Really super.
Well, because you're protected against. You've got that lovely revenue coming in month on month, which is really, really
You
helpful.
can actually, when you build your business up, actually have broken even before you started the month,
That's right.
or even actually
Yeah,
in profit before
Yes.
you started that month.
Yeah,
Which is fantastic. isn't it?
and you know, I have another business which is consultancy based, and that's a very different model. And you're working on your sales pipeline consistently to make sure that you're generating enough forward momentum to keep the business continually profitable. And certainly that is a more challenging environment to work in.
Absolutely.
Although you'll get better months in some respects, because you'll get some fluctuations where some months are very good and some months are just average, whereas in a SaaS business it's very steady.
Yeah, and you can grow it nice and gradually, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's also good to help to manage your costs as well, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you want to talk about? I think this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
No problem at all.
Really good information that you've given. Any last little lessons you want to just chuck in there? Something that stuck out to you? Maybe something that really had an impact on you that you feel is important that you want to share?
So yeah, I think there's one thing that I say is really important for any person, and that is that don't forget that you have to look after yourself. You know, and I think this is easily forgotten. You know, that's not just your physical, it's your mental health as well. So, you know, my experience is, you know, that if you allow the pressures to build up on you, then you can easily get overwhelmed.
Yes.
And that's not good for you in the long term. So I think whenever I'm working with entrepreneurs and whenever I'm talking about, you know, I think we live in a better society now. I used to work when I was in the NHS for a mental health trust. So we're going back.
Okay.
I'm going to have to think how many years we're going back now. Quite a few years.
That was interesting.
Well, really interesting. A really interesting experience, but it really opens your eyes up to A, how significant a problem it is, and B, how quickly people stigmatise mental health and treat it in a way that you know it makes no sense really. You know, it really doesn't make any sense. And I think we're better. I think we're getting better. But in business, there's still a very macho culture around, you know, not being fallible, you know, and not talking about issues. So I think if I had a tip to go away with, yes, of course, you know, really think about how you're running your business, make sure you're doing all the right things, look after your sales, look after your finances. But just remember that at the end of the day, if this is having a detrimental effect on your health, whether it be physically or mentally, you need to do something about it. You know?
Absolutely.
And you need to look after yourself. And actually, I think in this day and age, I think it's okay to put your hand up on that stuff and say, actually, I'm finding it quite difficult.
Yeah.
Because sometimes some days are difficult, more difficult than others. Some weeks are more difficult than others, and it's okay to talk about it. And I think that's, you know, there is still a cult of sort of the macho entrepreneurial leader.
Yeah.
You know,
with his flag.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Mountain.
You know, you can go back. You know, you go back through the generations, and there's always been classic examples. And to be fair, I think Steve Jobs is the embodiment of a bit of that as well. Yeah. You know, and there are others out there.
Unrealistic for most entrepreneurs.
Yeah, again, going back to what I said about, you know, you don't have to be Steve Jobs to be brilliant. Actually, you know, I take great pleasure from running the businesses that we have, and I love talking to other entrepreneurs. I don't say to an entrepreneur, you know, I'll only take you seriously if your business is turning over 700 million. No. That's not the guide I use. I don't say I'm only going to judge you if you're in the Sunday Times top, you know, richest people. I don't think that's what it should be about. I think it's about, you know, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that, you know, it's brilliant for the economy, and it's brilliant for the country if we have loads of really good entrepreneurs running, you know, small, medium-sized enterprises. Smashing companies that are revenue good, profit good, and the people working in there are good and healthy as well. And that for me is really important. So it's that whole piece, if you can possibly manage it.
Have you had an experience where you've been working ridiculous hours and
yes,
and,
no, absolutely. You know, well, I think for me, you know, when I worked in that corporate environment, ultimately it becomes all encompassing. Yeah. So I stood out of that corporate environment because I felt it was having a detriment on my health, mentally and physically, but also because actually I my children are a little bit older now, but at that time they were still relatively young. I have to think back, they were probably 8 and 10. But in the previous 2-3 years, I'd been away a lot, and certainly in that last year, you know, for various reasons, we were quite successful in terms of, you know, very rapid growth, lots of travel. I wasn't with them. I mean, I was like an absent parent. Yes. And actually, you know, was the return that I was getting from that in the round, so both financially and personally, enough to make that sacrifice? It absolutely wasn't. Yeah. It absolutely wasn't. And I think there's still as I said, there's a pervasive culture on top of business that says you shouldn't stand up and say, actually, do you know what? I want to spend time with my kids. I want to see them grow up. And actually, if that means I can't be, you know, a corporate CEO somewhere, I'm fine with that. You know, I'll go away and do my own thing. And being in this business and being in the business we've got allows me to do the things that I want to do.
And that is the point of business, isn't it?
For me,
to give you the life.
massive.
Business should give you life, not steal your life.
I think that's absolutely spot on. But for me, the ability to spend time with the family and the kids, and come in when I want to come in and go. And I work really hard. Don't be under any illusion. I put a lot of hours in. Yeah. But actually, I've got that nice opportunity now that I can say to myself, if I want to go and do something with my son or my daughter, I go and do it.
Yeah. Great.
And I think that's really important. And that comes back to that work-life balance thing. I still think we have a long way to go, particularly for entrepreneurs and SMEs, to remind themselves that you've got to do a bit of that as well. I know people whose businesses have not been successful, and I know the impact that's had on over a period of time, both during and post. Yes. And sometimes I look back and think, they're really hard on themselves. It's not easy.
No.
But we're very punishing about failure.
Yeah.
And nobody gets. I mean, Steve Jobs was sacked.
Yeah,
he was sacked from
a lot of failures.
Yeah.
Look at all the great,
We only remember the headlines. Yeah, we only remember the headlines.
You don't see the struggles that they went through to get there. They had
not.
Massive business failures.
Absolutely, they have, and I think sometimes that's just forgotten.
Yeah, it is. That's really interesting. So I was coaching a guy who was surviving on 3 hours sleep a night.
That's madness, isn't it?
And when I first met him, his hands were shaking. He was almost stuttering his words. And I said to him, how long can you keep that up? He goes, oh yeah, no, I've been doing it for years. It's all right. And he thanked me the other week. He says, I'm actually now getting a lot more sleep.
Yeah.
I can concentrate during the day. I can think sharply. And I spent the whole Saturday with my wife and kids for the first time in years. And I felt like crying. But I don't cry often, but I just thought, that is so cool. How rewarding is that?
And I think it'd be lovely if there are a number of, particularly in America, I've seen some, groups of businesses to get together that started to club together to talk about, the beauty of small businesses being successful businesses, and not feeling the pressure to take investment, to feel like you've got to double your business size every year to be recognised as doing well, and I think that's quite important actually. I think that there's going to be a pushback on that constant need to be, you need to double and go double again and double again and double again, and how many staff you've got, what's your turnover. What really matters is your business healthy, and are you enjoying it, and are you getting the benefits of having your own business and all that should come with that.
Yeah, excellent. Fantastic.
No, thank you very much. It's been
great
really
to talk
good.
to you, Brendan.
Really good.
Really
thank you very much. Yeah, no problems at all.
And brilliant.
Thank you.